Evening, everyone. This is a City Council special meeting. It's being held August 31st, 2017. I'm going to turn the meeting over to the council.
Mr. Manager, I would make a motion to appoint for this meeting Councilor Young as Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you very much. You can do that, and then we'll...
All rise. Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm looking at the agenda. Do we want to go in executive session to start off, or are you ready to?
Yes.
You do. Okay, so can I have a motion?
Motion to go in executive session.
Moved by Councilor Walker,
Second.
seconded by Councilor Pross. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, it's Councilor Lee and was opposed, and the rest of them are in favor, right?
Yep.
We'll be in executive session. We'll be back shortly.
you there, Councilor Young.
For Councilor Walker.
Yes.
Declare us out of executive session. Is there any new business?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion, if I may.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that the council adopt Order 74-08312017, authorizing the city manager to execute a purchase and sale agreement for city-owned property, PID number 204-212, and a portion of Troy Street right-of-way if vacated at a future date.
It was 240212.
240-212, pardon me.
He said
And Councilor Stone, are you seconding it?
I'll second that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Did we go with the discussion of anybody in the audience, or do we have these?
If I could speak to my motion, if I
Okay.
could, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to have the opportunity to do that. This, of course, concerns a purchase and sale agreement for the construction of workforce housing at a location that is a building that is currently owned by the city of Auburn. That building was previously assessed at $45,000 or thereabouts, and recently had a renewed assessment, as I understand the facts of this situation to be. Before that commitment date had hit, the negotiations with regard to this project and the developer and the city had been revolved around that $45,000 purchase price based on that former assessed value. Now that the commitment date has passed, it's good of us that we took the time to assess the impact that valuation assessment may have on the negotiations that we've had thus far. But after looking at the totality of the circumstances of this project, I believe that at the purchase price of $45,000, that this is really the best deal for the city of Auburn that we could have between some various proposals that have been explored by our city staff and the developer as potential options, which anybody in the public who's looked at the documents will see involve different percentages of TIF revenue and capture amounts being tied to certain purchase prices. So looking at the totality of the dollars that would eventually flow to the city through the 30-year lifespan of the TIF account, I could see that the city is going to be losing significant revenue if we try to negotiate a higher purchase price than $45,000. And some of the reasons that have been offered for that from the developer, as I understand it, relate to their ability to obtain financing and the percentage differences in the TIF amounts, whether it's 50% at $45,000 purchase price or 57% at $157,000 purchase price. All of these subtle changes, increasing the purchase price of the property, have a direct impact on the feasibility of the project. And right now, as a city-owned property, we receive zero tax revenue, regardless of the assessment of the property. So having looked at it and heard from staff, I don't think that the change in assessment really affects my opinion of the project or its value to the city and its long-term health. So I made the motion to move forward at $45,000 purchase and sale agreement, and looking at the numbers, I think that that's a great deal for the city, and I don't want to pass up this opportunity to A, provide workforce housing to our community that desperately needs it, and B, walk away from an opportunity to redevelop a property and obtain tax revenue. That property currently is not generating anything for property tax revenue for the city. So I see this as a positive step forward.
Councilor Stone, do you have anything to add?
Yes, couple comments. First of all, the council intends fully to allow and encourage the public input to this discussion. We want to hear from the public as to what they believe, basically anything, they can say anything they want to say about it. Couple things. Number one, according to Councilor Walker, who has a knowledge of the history of that lot, it's been sitting there for at least over 20 years, generating nothing, essentially costing the city money because we have to maintain it. I'm looking at a spreadsheet here that says that at 50%, we would be generating $106,000 a year in tax revenue. I also would like to, it probably could come up as part of a discussion of the TIF, but there's another important dynamic on these TIFs that people really should understand. And that's the impact of county taxes and on state revenue sharing, and the way that the TIFs shelter the city from increases in county taxes due to increased valuation, because this will be a projected $9.3 million project that will be that's going to be sited on this lot, and also the impact of the sheltering for state revenue sharing of that taxable valuation. So that we need to make sure we all understand that. And that's one of the reasons why I and several other councils wanted to get this discussion out in the public domain, so that we can thoroughly understand the dynamics of all the way the numbers are working here on this project. I was, you know, and I have the utmost confidence in the assessor, but I guess I would say that if somebody wanted to come down and to that parking lot and show me and explain to me why that lot is worth $374,000, I would be happy to meet them there in 10 minutes, and we can take a look at a 0.52 acre lot that supposedly is worth $374,000. I was in banking a long time, and I have no clue as to how that lot can be assessed at $374,800. But you know, if the assessor says that's her opinion, then fine. You know, that's her opinion. It's not my opinion. So anyways, I'm with Councilor Pross. I think he made excellent points. I'll take the 106.9 for the next 30 years in taxes, vis-a-vis zero for God knows how many years.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lee Adams.
Adam Lee, but
Adam, okay.
it's cool. The part of this that I'm really struggling with is that we, as the city, did an assessment, and we're saying that this piece of property is worth $378,000, but we're planning on selling it for $45,000. And that's the part I'm tremendously struggling with. And I guess I have, one of the reasons I wanted this to be public is I feel like everybody deserves the answers to some questions, so I'm going to ask some questions of staff, and whomever has the answer, I'd appreciate the answer to that. Can someone give us a description as to why a piece of property that was assessed at some part of the past for $43,000 has now this year been assessed at $378,000. Some of the justification for that are the comps that are involved in it.
Counselor, I'm going to see if Michael Chambliss would like to respond to that question. Michael?
The assessor pulled comps in that area, and a couple of comps they used, the sales, I would go that they're the opposite of a fire sale, and I think our assessor does a wonderful job, but I don't always agree with numbers, of course. But we look at a property value is worth what someone's going to pay for it, and she looks at it as comps. And one of the properties that sold down there for over $300,000 on a small lot, the building value was high, and it was a building that had a business going, that was making money. It's non-conforming, you can't rebuild something that size. The land value was probably between $60,000 and $80,000, not as high as that, obviously, even though the total sale was. Another piece sold down there that was needed for a parking lot for a nonprofit company, and so it's close to their property, so that's why they paid more money for that piece of property. It was a demand that couldn't be filled by any other piece of property. And probably another one of the comps would be 62 Spring Street, which, as you know, was bought by the Auburn Housing Authority and then donated to a company to build that new housing that's going into there. So that sold for, I think, $400,000, the building on Spring Street. So you had some comps out there, that's what she went by, and there's some different variables of why they sold for higher than what would be a normal market value for that. I do not believe that anybody on that lot up there would pay that kind of money, nor would they put a $9 million building on that property. That's why I support where it's at now.
Well, and that's where I'm struggling, is we as a city have said it's worth that amount and that it has that potential value. So when was it last assessed prior to this year?
I don't know, because I wasn't prepared to go into an assessing issue with that. I know that she was catching up, and she's been doing a lot of work since she's been here, and so that's recently one of the areas where she was at that. So I'm guessing it's been sitting there for a long time at that amount of money.
I know that we've been listing properties recently. Has there been any other interest by any other developer or potential purchaser in that property?
I think an abutter inquired to Eric Cousin, the Deputy Director of Economic Community Development, on that property and why it was being sold. There was no offer made on that, but I wasn't privy to that conversation. Eric just told me that there was a abutter that was asking about it, but we had no other interest from any other developers on that property. If somebody had $385,000, there's probably a list of 300 properties they would look at in Auburn before they would look at that one.
Okay, is it our understanding, and this is a question about the purchase and sale agreement, is it our understanding that if this project is not built as anticipated in the purchase and sale agreement within 2 years, that land would then become ours again?
I'd have to read back through the purchase and sale because it was written by our city attorney.
It seems an important point to me because I think I'd like an answer to that question. I don't want to sell a piece of property, have them not develop that piece of property as we're anticipating.
I know there's conditions in there, and if you hold on one second, I'll read it and see what it is.
While he's reading through that, Councilman Walker?
Well, there's, I guess, a couple points to this. I would like to hear from the developers for sure, and I'd like them to talk a little bit about, you know, the TIF and what they think this is going to bring to our area. And you know, I've heard some of it, but I'd like the public to hear more of it. And then, of course, I'm waiting for some of the answers that Adam Lee just asked for. So until we have, I think, all the answers, it's pretty tough to make this decision right this minute.
Thank you. Is there any other?
Actually, I had some more questions.
Yes, okay. Back to you.
I had heard some concerns that, oh, okay. I think it's the 18-month termination language. Is that what we're pointing to?
Yeah, so it would terminate in 18 months, and the city would keep all the earnest money.
As well as the property?
That is correct.
And there's presently part of this lot has a parking lot that's utilized by the library, I think for event parking. Would the library lose that parking?
There would be some parking spots there, obviously, because the whole thing's a parking lot that's pretty much free parking. Doug Green, our urban development specialist, is working now on all the parking in that area, and we have quite a bit of parking out there. And we're also dealing with Pan Am and the Department of Transportation, who owns lots out there. So it looks like they may be turning over some properties to us to add some parking in that area. So we're currently working on that.
Are we working with the library on that to ensure that they have sufficient parking?
We're working with the whole area, yes, that's correct.
Okay. I have some questions for the developers too, but I wonder if we're going to bring them up.
Yes, could you come up? State your name, who you represent.
Is this on?
Yes.
Good evening, members of the council, Mr. City Manager. My name is Nathan Zanton. I'm the president of the Zanton Company. We're the real estate development firm out of Portland, which we specialize in high-quality, professionally managed rental housing in and near downtowns in Maine. That's our mission. And with me is Andy Jackson, project manager for the Zanton Company, to my right. And he would be the project manager for this project. I would be the project executive. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, Councilor Lee.
So we had a slate of proposals given the new assessment. One of them was the ones that's been proposed currently, which is $45,000 as a purchase price, a 30-year TIF at 50%. Another option was a $157,000 purchase price with a 57% 30-year TIF. Can you explain to us why, with that purchase price, you would need to increase the TIF to 57% from 50%?
Sure. And Andy, feel free to jump in here. The reason, Councilor Lee, is that we would be paying a higher purchase price. The purchase price would jump from $45,000 to $157,000. So for us to pay the extra $112,000, we would need to borrow $112,000 more as part of our financing package. And so then the question would be, how can we service that debt? So the additional TIF funds would be to service that additional mortgage. There's no other source of funds available to the deal besides additional mortgage.
I guess on a more granular level, why is that? It's that 7% in particular that you'd be adding to it that you need to get to the number of $112,000.
Exactly.
On the
Exactly.
purchase
And,
price?
yep. And if, for example, if you said, well, what about a $100,000 purchase price? Then we would say, okay, we would need a TIF about halfway between the 50% TIF and the 57% TIF. Because that's the $100,000 purchase price is about halfway between $45,000 purchase price and a $157,000 purchase price.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a comment if I could, Mr.
Yes, I'll let you have a comment.
One of the reasons that I'm supporting, I made this motion and I'm still supporting it, is because this city council has adopted a policy of looking and has instructed staff to look at municipal-owned properties that are just sitting there and not doing anything for the community, for our tax rolls, and to find and to explore options to develop those parcels. And I feel like staff has gone out of their way to look at some of these parcels and to present some of these options to us. And I don't see a way that a $9.3 million development is going to come to one of these city-owned properties without some sort of a subsidized system in place. Now, the tax credits that are available to developers that are eventually marketed, to investment companies in the long term of these projects, that's how it's done in this country. That's how we get these projects done. And if we can't come to terms within the confines of the rules that developers have to follow in order to qualify for these tax credits, then there is no $9.3 million investment. So I still see it as a win-win. The difference between $45,000 and $110,000, or even the full assessed value of this property, to me, is a small change compared to what we stand to gain as a city in the long run, which, under the formulas that the developer has to use not only for their financing but also to qualify for the tax credits that are critical to having the project go forward, is a substantial difference. At the assessed value of, or at $380,000 purchase price, the city would look at gaining $1.6 million over the 30-year life of the TIF at a 75% TIF revenue to the developer. So that's compared to $3.2 million under the present proposal at $45,000. And I just cannot walk away from that type of money when we've asked staff to go out there and look at the municipal-owned properties and find ways to turn it into tax-generating.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor.
I have a question for the developer.
Yes, Councilor Stone.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm excited for this project. I think it's going to be if it is approved by the council, and we do authorize the city manager to sign a purchase and sale, I think it'll be a very fine housing development. My question to you is more of a general question based upon your many years' experience as a real estate developer. As I look around the city of Auburn, and really, if I look around the city of Lewiston, I don't really see a lot of private developments building multifamily housing. Most of the projects that are going in are workforce and et cetera. They're getting some sort of Maine State housing assist. Why, and I think it's important for the public to hear, what developers are facing in terms of looking at building privately financed projects in the downtowns of Auburn and Lewiston. Why do you suppose that there are not a lot of privately financed projects?
Sure. That's a very good question, Councilor Stone, and is a question we get fairly often. The reason is that rents aren't high enough to privately finance the development of multifamily rental housing. We continue to look at ways to try to do that, and so we're always running numbers in different communities on, could we do an all market rate project? We would love to. We haven't yet found in Maine, and if we moved down to Massachusetts, we could do it because rents there are so much higher. But in Maine, even in Portland, rents are, well, they did get high enough just for briefly, but then construction costs jumped up, and now that window of opportunity to do all market rate rental housing seems to have closed in Portland. But in Auburn, for certain, we would have to charge about $2,200 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment and $1,600 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment in order to just go out, get a loan from a bank, get equity from investors to fill the gap of what the bank wouldn't lend us, and build an apartment building with no subsidies. And we just don't think those rents are achievable in Auburn. In fact, not even really close. So in order for us to build high quality rental housing in Auburn or Lewiston, And by the way, that includes a market rate component. We always include market rate units along with our workforce units, and they look exactly the same. You wouldn't be able to tell a market rate apartment from a workforce apartment. In order for us to be able to build high-quality rental housing in Auburn or Lewiston, we need to have some sort of subsidy, whether it's historic investment tax credit, an affordable housing tax credit, or both. So for example, we did a 48 apartment project in the Bates Mill complex, Bates Mill number 2, and we used historic tax credits and affordable housing tax credits. Right now, we're about 2 months away from breaking ground on the Hartley block on Lisbon Street in downtown Lewiston. That one has affordable housing tax credits, does not have historic because those buildings burned down, unfortunately. So it's all new construction. And this would be because there's no historic fabric remaining on this site at Troy Street and Hampshire Street. We can't use historic tax credits, but we can use affordable housing tax credits, and that's what allows us to charge rents that are low enough so that those units will rent, if that makes sense.
It does. A follow-up question?
Yes.
Yes. Because I think it's important that both the council and the public hears about the market, understands the market. What are lenders looking for now for down payment on commercial projects? Commercial, residential?
Well,
Generally.
Yeah, I think generally, I think you're a former banker, so you would probably have a more up-to-date input on this than me, but around 30%, I would say.
That's what I was. That's what I was going to
yeah.
say.
So in other words, you can only borrow 70% of what you need to build the project, and then you have to go to investors for the other 30%, and they're looking for anywhere from a 10 to a 15% return. So that means that's part of why you have to charge those extremely high rents in order to make it work.
Yeah, and the debt service coverage, which is the amount of income that covers the loan payment, is running what in your
Maybe 1.2. So 120%. So you have to have 120% of what you need available to pay that mortgage.
So would it be fair to say that if you're running, if you're trying to finance a project privately, there are a lot of obstacles to make that happen.
Absolutely, and I think that's the reason that you just don't see it being done. It's not that there aren't developers around here who have the talent to do it. It's just that the financial model is not available. It just does. It's not there. If we were outside Boston and we could get rents of $3,200 a month for a 2-bedroom, no problem. But sheetrock here costs just as much as sheetrock in Boston. And bricks cost just as much here as they do in Boston, yet the rents are so much lower that the numbers just don't work here.
Yeah. Now, and I don't know where, I really want to get this out into the public. We hear, well, you're giving them a 50% TIF and you're losing out on 50% of the tax revenue. Are there not offsets that are in play here? Could you go into some of the offsets?
Absolutely. So every time, if we were to build an all market rate project or any kind of new development in Auburn that did not have a TIF, for every additional dollar of new tax revenue that you would get from our project, you would lose about 47 cents of that to 3 different things. One is you would pay higher taxes to the county, because the county taxes are based on the total value of property in Auburn. Number 2 is you would get less money from the state for general purpose aid to education, also known as GPA, general purpose aid to education, because that's based on a formula based on the total valuation of your property in Auburn. And the third is you would get less revenue sharing from the state, which is also based on how much taxable value you have. So when you get an extra dollar, you lose 47 cents. So you're really only netting out 53 cents. Now here, if you do with us a TIF of 50 cents, you're getting the 50 cents. You're giving 50 cents back to us in order to take out a bigger mortgage. But the 50 cents that you're getting, you can use, to pay for pay for schools.
It's sheltered from the things you mentioned.
Right, it's sheltered from the things you mentioned, so the 50 cents that you're keeping, you keep all of that. You don't have to send any of that to the state or to the county. So it's very close to the same amount that you would get from a project that doesn't have a TIF, if that makes sense.
And I think we're all entitled to our own opinions, but, we are not entitled to our own facts. The facts are, as you just laid out, that we're the net impact of a TIF is basically, offset by, the 47 you just talked about is offset by,
The tax shift.
The tax shifting that is going on that's sometimes difficult to understand. I know I didn't really understand it when I came on the council, but we've looked at enough of them, so. At this point. So, Mr. Mayor, that would be the end of my questions for the developer.
Councilor Stone. Now, is there anybody from the audience who would like to?
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to approach the chair and the microphone? State your name, your address. For the people at home and around the world.
Good evening. I'm Dana Staples. I live at 32 Greenfield Drive in Auburn.
Maybe you get a little bit closer to the mic. Thank you, Dana.
Dana Staples, 32 Greenfield Drive in Auburn. I'm here tonight not necessarily to talk about the project. Honestly, the agenda came across my email 3 days ago, and I haven't made time to read it. It's summer, it's busy. I am here because I'm very concerned with this meeting. This is the Thursday before Labor Day. We had 3 days' notice on this meeting. We waited 10 minutes for quorum for you guys before we could start the meeting. It was difficult for you to be here. It was difficult for me to be here. This is not the best time to do this business. I'm not really sure what the rush is. You guys, I'm sure, have known about this deal for quite a while. I'm sure you've been talking about it in executive sessions. It might be a great deal. I don't know. But why are we having a meeting on a Thursday night to discuss the sale of this property? That part is very concerning to me. I assume there's some deadline involved. I'm sure that's what it is. But you guys have known about this deal for a long time. There's no reason we couldn't have done this at a council meeting, on a regularly scheduled council meeting on a Monday night. You've known about this deal for a while. This part does not make sense to me. It really feels like a backroom deal, something you're trying to shove through the taxpayers, and just slip under the rug. It's very concerning. The lack of transparency with this is outrageous, is simply outrageous. And maybe this is the right thing to do, and maybe it's a great thing for the city. I don't know. I'm not going to cast judgment on that tonight. But this is not the way to conduct business. And this is not the way for a representative of a city to deal to its constituents on a Thursday before Labor Day with 3 days' notice at 5:30. It's not even the regular time for a council meeting. We usually do those at 7. You guys couldn't even show up. I mean, Jim, you're a good guy, but you couldn't even show up on time.
I was 5 minutes late, not 10. And obviously, the reason I was 5 minutes late was because there were factors outside my control.
Counselor, I'll give you an
No,
opportunity.
I get it. I mean, you're right. Do you get it or not? I mean, you made a big deal about being the quorum not showing up in 10 minutes.
Counselor, I'll let you give you an opportunity to speak later.
Sure. So my point basically here is that, you guys all seem. I noticed some confusion amongst the counselors tonight about this deal with the assessment. It doesn't seem like you guys have given this the proper time, and I just don't get why this is a Thursday night meeting for one agenda item when we have 2 counselors and the mayor missing. Why did it need to be done tonight?
I can answer that question if you'd like, and if I leave something out.
Go ahead,
Staff
City Manager.
Staff can add to it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason for the meeting tonight is because Economic Community Development Director Michael Chamings came to me and informed me that we had a timing issue in terms of the state with the Maine Housing Authority. That was approximately probably a week ago. The mayor was away. The only people that can call a special meeting are the mayor or two councilors. The mayor's just recently been married. I waited for the mayor to return. We met on Monday morning and had a conversation about it. The mayor's comment to me was there are two councilors that would like to hold a special meeting. I'm supportive of that. There were two councilors that were willing to do that, so we scheduled it. There's nothing that is, I think, in terms of ulterior motive here. We're trying to do what we think is the right thing. The deadline is an important deadline that we need to recognize in order for this project to work. You've heard the discussion earlier about the point system and the Maine State Housing Authority and how that works. In order for Mr. Zanton to be able to do what he needs to do, in order for us to do what we need to do, we had to have the meeting. We have had a good deal of discussion. I think the recent change in the assessment has caused us all to look at it more closely. And there have been discussions taking place this week about that, and they've taken place tonight in public, in the open, for everyone to be able to hear. So there are no ulterior motives here. We're trying to do what we think is the right thing, and to the best of our ability. I just want to see if Denise or Michael have anything that you want to add to what I've already said.
Well, you hit the nail right on the head. But basically, this project came in a little late, and we're actually looking at trying to set up a system in the future, so when we have projects come in, there's timelines to give us a better chance to look at all these projects. With that being said, it is a $9 million project. They do have deadlines to meet, and we have a holiday that's throwing a meeting forward. So at this point, we're not even at the TIF stage. We're at the stage of designing the building. And so they have right title and interest in that property, so they can go to the planning board and get planning board approval. Then they have to wait for the 30-day appeals process to go by before they can submit that. So we're trying to ensure that the proposed development is getting as many points as they can, because they're competing with projects around the state of Maine.
Do you have something to add, Dana?
I do understand all of that, but those deadlines didn't spring up on Monday. I mean, those deadlines have been around for quite a while, and so, you know, this could have been handled in the previous council meeting a week ago, or I don't see why it couldn't have been. Maybe there's something else I don't know, but it just seems like, I mean, it seems like these guys are coming in and just throwing this at us, and we have to approve it tonight, or else we lose out. And I think that's unfortunate, because this might be a great project. I don't know. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you. Thank you,
Dana Staples, for your comments. Anybody else? State your name and your address, please. Somebody might not know you.
Yeah. Dan Herrick, 470 Hatch Road. I also have to agree with Dana. And the more I listen to some of the reasons why this meeting is being held, it makes you even wonder more why this couldn't have been done back a ways. As some of you know, I've been a counselor too, and when we had the 12-hour meeting, tonight was the deadline, I got the point, I don't want it. I won't even do it. No, because you people knew about it long enough. And I believe Mike Chambers knew about this. If the city manager didn't, shame on him. But this should have been done a long time ago. A couple of things were brought up here tonight that is dead wrong. One was by Councilor Pross when he says that These properties that the city owns, they've been working constantly hard to bring these back onto the public tax rolls. Well, I've been advocating to do this a long time ago. In fact, it should have been done the first few months that you council came on here. Maybe if we put the property that the city owns, some of them back on the tax rolls, like was you people have been asked and asked and asked by me as one for some I wanted to buy, and I never could get an answer, maybe our taxes wouldn't have gone up. We left a lot of money on the table this year. When has tax-acquired properties come in front of the public? We get all kinds of paperwork in the mail. These are all tax-acquired properties. None of them have come to the public for sale. None of them. Then you got Bob Stone, who was a banker, all of a sudden now is a tax assessor. He knows property values. Well, when these properties that the city of Auburn owns wants to come as tax acquired to the public for sale, I'm going to be the first one to offer 1/3 of what every one of them properties are valued at, because I don't feel they're worth what they're assessed at either. My home ain't worth what it's assessed at. I think all of you could question that more than once when you get your tax bills. So assessed property is assessed property, and it's done by comps. The one I bought on Hatch Road in Ag Zone, the comp was the one I sold on Jordan School Road in Auburn, Ag Zone. Basically, same amount of land, same style building, blah, blah, blah. That's how it's done. And we should stay at that value. Maybe if we put it out to the public first, maybe we could have got a better deal. This housing, how much can we afford in this city? Every single housing project, property that goes up creates more police, fire, city services, more employees. How much more can we withstand? Oceanfront properties there on South Main Street, and then I believe it's across from the little theater there, Academy Street. How are those projects treating the city of Auburn? Maybe I'll look into them first. What do we got invested in them? What's our return on those projects? Because I didn't vote for either one of them, because I saw it coming down the road. Those apartment buildings are still sitting there. Just something to think about. What's it costing us?
Thank you. Anybody else?
Joe Gray, Soapers Mill Road. First off, you mentioned all the financial paperwork, but there is none to us. You have it. You might think it's great. We can't see it. So, again, as these other people have stated, behind closed doors is not information. If we were in the public to assess this project properly, we should have that information as well, and not sharing it is not acceptable. We seem to be a city of studies, and Councilor Stone said the party line, we really need workforce housing here. Show me a study that says we need it. There's a lot of houses empty in Auburn. So show me a study that proves it.
If I may, this is also available at the city website, but these are the documents that you're referring to.
No, that wasn't available when I got my agenda packet, so. Councilor Stone also pointed out that Councilor Walker said that property's been empty for 20 years. That shows a lack of effort on the Economic Development Department. Doesn't show that that property is worth nothing. So there's two ways to look at everything. Again, I agree with former Councilor Herrick. This was never listed as for sale. None of the properties, except for where the former bowling alley was, and I think it's 186 right on the river. Those are the only two properties I've seen listed by the city for sale. This property was never listed. If I'd known you were going to sell that property for $40,000, I'd have bought it. It seems that every time we offer TIFs, we offer them to people from away. Why? He has a development company. Why don't we offer him a TIF to develop something locally, smaller? We don't need 50 apartments in one spot. We could do smaller. If you want 50 apartments in one spot, move to Kansas. Move to Seattle, where they do those huge places. This is not those places. We try to develop incrementally. Big government projects seldom work. You know, when I read the agenda packet, I came up with all kinds of pros and cons of this project to try to develop it with the very limited information we have. But nobody here has actually said, other than we get $106,000 a year in tax money, why this project is good for us. So why is it good for us? They've said, these people over here have said things like, it's going to increase the fire, the police, community services, all of that stuff. Councilor Walker and I have sat in many meetings at the United New Auburn Association. We've had lots of people come in and say, a big problem with the schools is transient students. This project and all of these other projects that you're doing are going to add to that problem. Because even if this is wildly successful and people come in and they make enough money or they improve their lot in life and they can move out because they become income ineligible for this property, their kids have to move to another school. You're not helping things. You're hurting things. You're making the problems that Auburn has worse. The money aside, whether it's 50% or 53% or 47% or whatever, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You talk about sheltered stuff. The people who are going to move in and out of that are going to upset the schools. Thank God this project at least is near services and near bus lines. You put the last one out on Minot Avenue, a food desert. They have to travel over a mile to get to damn food because you're not thinking about the actual project. You say, oh, big shiny building, oh, goody goody. But that's not what it's about. It's about the people that live there. We have to support the people. You're not doing your job. Lastly, I just found out that this is a $9.3 million project. But what's the assessed value when it's done? We were told the arena was an $8.5 million project, but the final assessment was just over $6 million. So we don't know really what this value is going to be or what we're going to add. And then you throw in Troy Street for no charge. You give away the lot. You throw in Troy Street for no charge. And you upset all of the parking that the library had. The library is the most used benefit of living in this city. You guys here have a parking garage right up behind you. The library's got nothing, but they have a lot more visitors there every day than you have here. It's just, it benefits no one except the people who are going to come in here and make millions of dollars. You say we get $1.6 or $3.2 million over 30 years. What do they get? How much are they going to get out of this project? A hell of a lot more than that. And yet everybody in this city has to pay so they can get rich. It just doesn't make sense. Bad project.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mike, are you prepared to answer any of those questions?
They sounded like statements. I wasn't paying
Oh.
attention to individual questions.
Manager?
Well, I think we've already talked about a number of the benefits, and there is information in the packet regarding it, and also the information was posted as well. We know that we have an issue with workforce development. This provides workforce housing. That's a key issue for us as a community as we move forward. We want to have economic development in the downtown. This will benefit economic development in the downtown. City's investing significantly in Hampshire Street. This will be a complement to that. I think the work that we're doing is going to be a positive benefit to the community. We also, I believe, by doing this project, are going to be moving forward as a city to embrace I think, the development that needs to take place in the downtown. So I'm supportive of the project. I think that it is a good project for the city, and I appreciate the comments this evening, but I believe this is the right thing to do.
And plus, some of the negatives and everything that are going to come up is going through the process, as far as traffic and all that sort of thing. Where we are in this process is it's just trying to get the application approved, money approved. And if the project goes, it has to go through all the zoning, and so things like schools and load and everything would have to be addressed at that time. So is there any other further discussion on the council? Back to the council. Yes?
I think I agree with a good amount of what Dana Staples said. Sometimes intent doesn't matter, it's simply the appearance or the effect. And while I don't think that there's any sort of malicious intent behind this coming to us at this point, I think it was an omission to not have this come to us earlier. We know what the Maine State Housing Authority deadlines were in advance, and it should have been held at a regular public meeting. There's nothing perfect about this deal, and there's nothing perfect about this project. I know that if we're going to build an effective downtown that doesn't displace people who presently live in that downtown, and if we're going to have good retail, we're going to need to provide housing for the people who are going to be working at those retail places. I would prefer that if we were to create workforce housing, it was based on renovating a housing stock that presently exists in the downtown. That would be a preferable way for us to do development. I hope that if we end up doing this project, that it could perhaps be a stimulus for the downtown, and may lead to others being willing to develop some of the presently existing housing stock. I do also struggle with the idea that we as a city are saying that this piece of property is worth $378,000 and we're selling it for $45,000. I understand that there is some significant question given that it was very recently assessed at $43,000, but we as a city have an assessing department that has made the claim that there's a prospect for this place being worth a substantial amount of money. That all being said, when we evaluate these things, we can't evaluate the present existent project against the perfect project. We have to evaluate it against the status quo. Presently, this piece of property is not being used, it's not being sold, it's generating absolutely no revenue for us. And I think as Joe highlighted, if we are going to do housing projects like this, it needs to be in places that isn't going to substantially increase the services that we're going to need to provide to them. This is in the downtown, the place that we see is the most affordable place for us to do development and the most cost-effective place for us to do development. So I'm still very much struggling with the idea of this deal. I see a need for the project, and it's a tough one to evaluate against the existence of the status quo.
Any other councilors? You ready to vote then? Do we need a roll call on this? No. Okay. All in favor of the motion? Okay, it's 4. And are you opposed?
Yes.
Councilor Lee opposed. And the mayor and Councilor Titus have excused absence. Councilor Burns. So it passes. So you have some work, city manager. Yes. Negotiate a deal. Are there any other business? Do I hear a motion to adjourn then? Moved by Councilor Lee, second by Councilor Stone. All those in favor? It's unanimous. We're adjourned.